Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bob Gumbs here, the Concern Forum. First thing I wanted to do is say that I hope that everyone is enjoying their Saturday. It's a fairly nice day here in New York City, in Manhattan, and we have a lot to cover. First of all, I want to introduce my very good friend, John Bredin. Bredin. I always mispronounce his name.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's often been mispronounced.
Good enough.
Believe me.
Yeah. Him and his lovely wife, Claudia, they have a show called the Public Voice Salon. And, well, tell the folks about your show.
Well, the show is an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change, which we started 5 years ago because we are disappointed in a lot of the fare that's on mainstream media, and we feel like there's a lot of stuff that's not being covered. And essentially the show emerged out of my own experience as a teacher, as an educator, interested in community, interested in dialogue. I'm an English professor. I've been a teacher now for 20 years, English professor since the year 2000, an adjunct professor. And I believe in the importance of dialogue and language and culture and art, and also mixing politics into those conversations. And my wife got very excited when I shared with her this idea, and she said, let's do it. Her background is science, and both of us have a strong spiritual nature. Okay, and in fact, we met you at the Community Church of New York.
That's correct.
Wonderful organization, wonderful church on 35th Street between Park and Madison.
Yeah.
And so this idea of being in a community has always been important to me, and I feel like television talk shows and television news is kind of like an anti-community in a way. It's like people go in there for the soundbite, and it's very slick, and we want to create an antidote to that by showing real human conversation. And yeah.
Well, you know, that's interesting because you and I are kind of in the same neighborhood, so to speak.
Yes.
Folks have asked me, how did I get into this? I've been doing this now. We are now in September. So I've been doing this now since about, March, essentially.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing I need to announce also. Whereas before, I'm always going to be in a learning process. But as you know, what I did previously, I was doing shows approximately twice a month, that type of thing. Now, the Concern Forum is regularly scheduled every Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. From now until the cows come home, as my mom used to say. Yes. But no, we are a regularly scheduled show every Saturday at 3 o'clock, and we can be found on Time Warner, and what is that other one? Fios, channels 33, 34. Your public access channels. There are quite a few others, but that's the main thing to remember, that we are now on regularly every Saturday.
Terrific.
At 3 a.m. Thank you.
All right.
And people have asked me many times, where did I get the idea to do this? Well, I spent about 11 years in the United States Navy, which, believe it or not, I know it might sound, a little strange coming from a lefty.
Okay,
like myself,
that's right.
But I'm quite proud of my naval service.
As you should be.
Thank you. And one of the things that I used to do is, in the Navy and Marine Corps, you have a thing called standing watch. And in the Army, they call it guard duty. It amounts to the same thing. And at night especially, the old mid-watch, the dog watch, midnight to 4 in the morning, when you're at sea sometimes, the hours get to be long. And you have a chance to think about things. And my first ship that I was on, the USS Nimitz, nuclear aircraft carrier, we saw quite a bit of action. First starting off with the Iranian hostage rescue mission.
Right.
Under President Carter, which unfortunately didn't work out. I can't remember all the times that we were facing off in front of Libya, which is a whole political thing in and of itself. But suffice it to say that we saw a lot of action. The thing that really I harken back to in that score, one of the times that we were, this is after President Carter unfortunately lost his election, and Reagan became our president, and that increased our tempo even more so. And for some odd reason, I don't know, maybe in a past life or something, Reagan felt personally offended by Gaddafi's very existence. And so basically we were sent over there to constantly provoke this guy. And one time it actually worked. We found ourselves in a very bad situation. Our tempo was moving so fast that, and this happens unfortunately from time to time on aircraft carriers, one of our pilots, a young Marine guy, for some reason he didn't take the wave off and he crash landed upon the flight deck. And we had all of our ammunition, our fuel on top of the flight deck, as happens during flight ops. And it caused a chain reaction. The consequence was that we lost about 33 men killed.
So sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And shortly after that, we had another situation where we shot down a couple of Libyan planes that afternoon. And that evening, they sent up about 16 fighters out of Benghazi, coming directly at us. And I really thought I was going to buy the farm. And for some reason, at the last minute, they veered off, and they went what looked like, I was told on the radar, like they were heading for Israel. What happened after that, I don't know. This was back about 81, if I can remember correctly. And that got me to thinking, what happened if I had died out here? What happened if a bunch of us had died out there? And, at that particular incident. And it just, like I said, got me to thinking that do people, as Americans, do we really know what's going on, what our government is doing, where they're committing us? And and that's when I figured one night that, hey, somebody should have a show that kind of breaks things down to the average American. I hate using that term, average American, like that, because, we're all God's children, okay? But when I say average Americans, I'm talking about people that if they don't work a week, they're evicted. Which is the case with most Americans.
More and more.
Exactly. And the way that the mainstream media, and I'm not trying to sound like Sarah Palin, okay?
God help you.
But the way the mainstream media communicates to the average voter, sometimes it's like so far above the experience of the average person, and then sometimes it's absolutely childish.
Right.
And I said, we need some regular people, just to basically take the time so when things happen in the world, that people get a full understanding, because maybe it might help a little bit when they go, especially when they go into that voters booth.
Sure.
Now you see the big thing now,
right.
behind Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And he has these poor people thinking, well, hey, look at Don. he sounds just like I do. You know, and I have a hard time getting that. Does that mean that? Well, gee, he's just as ignorant as I am. Is that what they see in this guy? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, they say that he sounds like a regular person or just like one of us, and we have to be very, very careful of that because in terms of being commander-in-chief, you want someone who is extraordinary in their gifts and in their talents and in their capacities. Now, Donald Trump is a good businessman, all right? So that's and sort of a narrow focus on business. But I think that the skill set in being a president, you have to be a great communicator, a great negotiator. You have to have a strong sense of empathy or caring about other people. Now, here's the problem in our business culture today. Our business world is stressing a almost psychotic focus on profits over people, over the environment, and Trump just sort of got caught up in that culture because he went to Wharton Business School, and I think that the business schools now are having a corrupting influence on our society as a whole. I don't think the business of America is business. I think business has a place, and I also wanted to say a little something about you and how we met in this wonderful community church, and how it's wonderful to sit here and listen to you talk, Robert. You have a wonderful way of communicating, which is very humane and very deep, and it's not often in our media that we're allowed to see this kind of a person making sense and telling a story. As you began the program with a wonderful story, and when we watch Fox News or CNBC or most of the talk shows today, they just sort of go right into this kind of prefabricated, prescripted kind of format, and we're losing a sense of what real people are like. And I think you and I could be sitting at a coffee shop now. We could be at a campfire, sitting around talking and telling stories and sharing ideas. And I think that is what's wrong with our media. And I do want to also thank Public Access and the wonderful people here that make this possible. Freddie, Deshaun and Brian and I don't know all their names, but they're wonderful, wonderful people here. Malik, and also Liz, Richard, everybody here is just a great team here at Public Access. And I think that this is part of a larger transformation of society. It's something that I'm working on as an educator in my classrooms. And I see you as an educator here, Robert, creating space for humane interaction. And while we talk and while we share stories, we also talk about the issues of the day and what's important and what needs to be addressed. But I see you wearing a Bernie Sanders button. And I want to say that this past week, Bernie Sanders gave a wonderful speech at Liberty University, which I would urge every patriotic American to Google and watch the YouTube of, because he goes into a very hostile place for a radical liberal socialist. He goes into the college that Jerry Falwell founded. It's about as far to the right as you could imagine. But he does it with a sense of style and class and humanity. He doesn't insult anybody. He doesn't come off like I know all the answers. And he just uses a wonderful approach. He says, I believe, and then when I use as a rhetorical device, he kept saying, I believe this, I believe that. We have differences here, but we also have things in common. For example, and then he focused on the wealth inequality, which he believes and I believes is destroying our democracy.
Yes, it is.
And the one fact that stood out, and I played this for my students. I'm teaching now at NJIT. I'm teaching a class called Speaking, Thinking, Writing. Can you imagine this wonderful class? I never thought there would be a class like this, and it kind of makes sense for me because these are the themes that are important to me.
Excuse me, where's that located?
It's in Newark, New Jersey. It's a wonderful college in Newark, New Jersey. So in this class, I showed the YouTube of Bernie's speech, and my students thought it was very interesting. Some of them had only heard of Bernie Sanders. They weren't quite sure what his policies were, but we had a very engaging classroom discussion. I had them writing about it, thinking critically about it, and it's something that we have to, and the fact that really jumped out at me from this talk that he gave. He only gave a half-hour talk, but he's a wonderful speaker. He's from Brooklyn, you know.
Yeah,
he's a Brooklyn guy.
He's a home guy. Yeah.
Something about New Yorkers, they know how to communicate. Now Trump does it too, but I think Bernie does it even a little better. But Bernie does it with humanity and ideas that are good for people.
Yeah.
And Trump, I don't want to insult him or put him down. I just want to say that had he gone to different schools, had he been exposed to different ideas when he was younger, had he had a different kind of political education, he would be a different person today. So I think that's another thing. But quick, I just want to say, the thing that Bernie said that should be a shock to everybody is that in the past 2 years, Robert, 15 Americans made $170 billion. 15 people, the richest 15 people, who are already rich enough that they have more money than they could ever possibly spend in a lifetime, or 20 lifetimes. 15 people earned $170 billion with a B dollars. Now that is more money, I just want to finish. That is more money than the bottom 130 million own. If you total all of the net worth of the bottom 130 million people, it's less than 15 men who could very easily sit in this room that we're in, that, you know, picture like half of a subway car, you know, and they're making $170 billion. Something is radically wrong, and we have to fix that.
Now, hold on a second. When you say these 15 guys made 170, you didn't mean 170 billion each?
A total, aggregate. So 15 people earned 170 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. That's staggering. That's disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. So that's $170
billion
for
15 people.
Oh my God!
So let that percolate. I think they should put this on a T-shirt. Every American should know this statistic, which is staggering, and it's something which should wake people up. And I think it is waking people up because Bernie is drawing tremendous amount of support on the campaign trail. Hillary looks completely lifeless and empty compared to Bernie Sanders because she's coming out of a neoliberal, you know, that was when the Democratic Party moved to the right under Bill Clinton, all right? And I think when the Clintons first came to power, there was that feeling they might be true liberals, but that was proven wrong as they continued to move to the right. And now, you know, people don't trust Hillary Clinton.
Well, you know, I was looking because I carry a calculator with me.
Oh, right.
Unfortunately, in such a hurry to leave the house, I didn't bring my calculator out with me. But I was going to break that down into, you know, that's 15 people making $170 billion. And I was going to try and work it out. Because what do we have in America now? 350 million people?
Right.
And I was trying to, you know, break that down. How much would that be for each and every American? That sort of thing. Yeah. You know, you say that, and then you talk about this business with Hillary.
Right.
And I think, because I'm a registered Democrat here in New York City, I'm born and raised in Harlem, okay? And what disturbs me about Hillary, would she make a better president than Donald Trump?
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an argument that goes without saying.
Sure.
But you have to look at what people have done and what they have said in public life. I remember what happened when the Clintons, and I said the Clintons. I didn't say Bill. I didn't say Hillary. I said the Clintons. And I say that because that was by their diktat. Okay? Remember what Bill said. You get one of us, you get both of us.
2 for 1.
Exactly.
Two for the price of one. Okay.
Right. And I remember that that young, retarded man of color that while he was running for president, he took time from his campaign to go back to Arkansas, where he was the governor, and make sure that that gentleman was executed. You recall that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And this poor guy, at his last meal, he told them, you can save my French fries or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
I'll be back later.
Yes.
You know, he had no full comprehension of what he was getting ready to do or have done to him. Now, believe me, I'm not trying to bless murderers, okay? Knowing the criminal justice system in this country, as sorry folks, especially in the South, was the guy really guilty? I don't know. But in our country, where we're supposed to have a sense of humanity and how we administer justice,
right.
this man was obviously mentally short.
Right.
You know, but yet Bill Clinton found it so important to show that
how tough he was.
Yeah, that whole tough on crime thing.
Right.
He rushed back in the middle of his campaign to sign off so he could pull the switch on this guy.
Yeah.
And I have a big problem with that. Okay. I also have a problem with the fact that while in the White House, and I was there when they came in, I had gotten back from the war, and I started working for the government about 3 months after I got back home. And I was there when they first came to town.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about basically trying to appeal to the white working class demographic, that seemed to be the main thrust of where they were coming from. I mean, I can be just as mean and rough criminals as a Republican can. And he proves that because you look now in the communities of color, across the Black and Latino communities of color, and you find such a lack of leadership, a lack of, how should I say, young men and men in their 30s and 40s that are supposed to be community guides, so to speak. And we don't have that. Why? Because Clinton signed off on that, what is that proper phrase? Maximum sentence, mandatory time. A lot of judges found it repugnant, but they said, well, this is the law that they've come down with.
Yeah.
So you have guys getting 10 years for having a nickel bag, that type of thing. Or a woman being sentenced to 5 years in prison for shoplifting a chicken, and especially in the southern states. And I'm saying these are the Clintons that I'm familiar with. Yeah. The ones that came up with the idea of the Democratic Leadership Conference.
DLC,
Yeah, DLC. The purpose of which was to make sure, remember Jesse Jackson?
Sure. Yeah.
To make sure that no Jesse Jackson could ever get the wherewithal within the party to run for president again.
True.
See? So when I see Hillary out there trying to have this revival of the 90s, I start to think, wait a minute, are these the same people that said, well, we can get rid of Glass-Steagall? And you can see what that got us at, And I look at Bill, and this is September. When was it? Just this past July. Didn't he make an apology to the communities of color?
He did.
For that mandatory sentencing?
He did. Well,
and that welfare thing that he signed?
Right.
That threw millions upon millions of children of color?
Right.
Basically to the wall.
And what about NAFTA?
Oh my God. Oh.
The outsourcing of millions and millions of jobs. And it's been said that there's a connection between NAFTA and the crime bill, because they both happened in 1994.
Yeah.
So there was this awareness that there's going to be tons of people out of work and on the streets, and one way you control a population is through incarceration. You keep the people under control, and this way there's less of a chance of rebel-rousing, of people resisting the status quo, of people joining political movements against the system.
Right.
So prisons have always historically functioned as a way to control the population and keep everything from getting out of hand from the standpoint of power. I have to confess that in the beginning, I was a Clintonite, and I had all this hopes that they were going to be liberal and progressive.
A lot of us did.
And one interesting thing I like to mention, which is not talked about, is that Michael Lerner, who was a philosopher and a rabbi, and who created an organization called the Network of Spiritual Progressives, which is trying to create a more caring and loving society, and also to bring spiritual people who are political together to stand up to the religious right. It's a progressive left movement, a spiritual movement, co-founded by Michael Lerner and Cornel West. And so anyway, Michael Lerner was very friendly with the Clintons when they were running for president in 1992, and he was a frequent dinner guest at the Clinton White House. And the first speech that Hillary made, she was quoting from this Politics and Meaning, which is super liberal and progressive, and that was a good thing. But then what happened was Rush Limbaugh devoted a whole chapter in his book to denouncing the Clintons for their involvement with this lefty rabbi who they claimed had a skull cap with beads on it and was a radical leftover from the 60s, and who was a Rasputin-like character controlling the president. This was all lies. But I felt that what that story illustrates is that the Clintons were complicated people, and but they could have moved in a more liberal, traditionally liberal direction. I mean, if you look at the 60s and if you look at Bill Clinton, part of the counterculture, they emerged from that, but then they sort of shifted to the right. And then in 1994, when the Democrats lost very badly in the congressional election, Bill Clinton listened to Dick Morris, who was an advisor at NYU professor, who said to him, "You know, Bill, I think you need to move to the right." So it was a calculated move. And I think from that moment on, the Clintons began to be sellouts instead of, the original hopes that they represented started to fade out. But I always, had some kind of faith. I even wrote Bill Clinton a letter, believe it or not, in the year 2000 when he first moved to New York. And I was, at the time, a member of Judson Memorial Church in the village. Extremely progressive, wonderful congregation there, historically significant in the arts and politics. Yoko Ono had things to do with Judson Church back in the 60s. First church to exhibit a Robert Rauschenberg collage when people thought he was too far out, and very, very much on the left as far as a congregation. And so when Bill Clinton moved to New York, I wrote him a letter, and I said, if you're looking for a new church, I think this would be a good place for you. Because I felt that if he got involved in that church, it would be good for him politically.
Did he ever respond?
He did. He sent me a wonderful letter, and which I framed. It's still hanging in my hallway. And he said, "Thank you for telling me about this wonderful church and all their amazing programs in history. It was kind of you to think of me." And he signed it, Bill Clinton. So that was kind of something that I'm very happy and proud with. But then, you got to look at people and what they've done, and always also think about what people might do. And I never give up hope and faith in anybody. I'm an educator, and I'm a spiritual person, and I think we need to love people and forgive people. And I think in our country we need to get over this polarizing discourse, and begin to put new educational institutions into place that would produce different kinds of people who are more open-hearted and loving and spiritual. So we need is new media and new education.
Exactly.
You
just hit some very good points there. And I guess that's also during the same period when Hillary's friend, remember Karen Edelman?
Yeah, heard of her.
Okay, the African American lady that was very prominent in the Clinton group.
Right.
And she was the one that had begged Hillary and had begged Bill. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, she was a classmate at one point of either Hillary or Bill. Yeah, she was a classmate of one of them. I forget which one. And, you know, she was like, you know, there along with, you know, the original Clinton group. And they broke her heart when he signed.
Marilyn Edelman.
Marilyn,
that's
right.
her, yeah.
Marilyn Edelman. And she begged him not to sign that anti-poverty bill. For the out of fear for the damage that it would do. And I remember Clinton himself saying that if he had the chance to do, you know, make any do-overs, or what he regretted, he said he regretted signing that bill.
Well, it's big of him to admit. Yeah, you have to say that.
Unfortunately, you know, you look at the horrors that, and the anti-crime legislation, the tremendous damage that's done. You also hit on another point, and that is the problem that I have with our side, with the left. Yeah. Because unfortunately, too many of us, especially once we get into public office, it's like, oh, well, I don't want to be seen with you guys in the daytime. Right. You know? Right. That kind of thing.
It's called the sister soldier moment.
Oh, yeah, right? I was going to hit on that,
Clinton had the sister soldier moment. Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, that sister soldier moment. Right. Now, we're living through the fact that everything that she was saying was true. You know, because that's another part of the conversation I wanted to hit on.
Wow.
This huge amount of black and Latino men that have been killed by the police.
Yes.
Wait a minute, time out. Before I go any further, let me say something, okay? I have no problems with the concept of law enforcement. Good. Being a cop is not the most dangerous job in this country, but it's pretty damn dangerous. Right. And as I consider myself a military person, a military man, and I have respect in terms of paramilitary organizations and what they're sworn to do and uphold. I have met some excellent police officers. True. Damn good police officers. Right. But when you have a system that is structured with that main purpose to control non-white males, right, you're going to have problems. Sure. And from time to time, you are going to attract negative people. And, I mean, all you have to do is look. Oddly enough, since Obama became president, and you can see the amount of negative interactions that people of color, now both male and female, have had with law enforcement. Wow. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm gonna sort of move this into an intellectual direction for a second, because I think we need to look at the deeper problems that are systemic to the system as a whole. Herbert Marcuse is a great philosopher whose work I admire. He was part of this Frankfurt school who came out of Europe, and they came to the U.S. People like in the 1930s and 40s, Erich Fromm, the psychoanalyst, Theodore Adorno. They were neo-Marxists, and they developed a criticism of the society, and that there is unfairness rooted in the system. And if we were able to solve these problems, if we had more equality, if we had a better, more equitable distribution of wealth, for example, if we had a shorter work week, if we shared the resources more equitably, there would be less crime, there would be less anger, people would be much happier, and, you know, I think you could reduce the crime if you transform the society. And Marcuse always used to say, we can't ever get stuck in the as things are. We have to go beyond the is and talk about the what might be. The future possibility of a world. And he looked around and he wrote a book called The One-Dimensional Man in 1964, which was a seminal book by the New Left, which was emerging at that time with Tom Hayden. Tom Hayden was a roommate of a guy named Stanley Aronowitz, wonderful, who I'm going to see tomorrow at the Brooklyn Book Festival. He's going to be there talking about his latest book on labor, and it's called The Death and Life of American Labor. He basically pronounces the labor movement is dead. Someone had to come out and say it, right? Otherwise, how are you going to rebuild if you don't articulate what the problem is? And he offers a prescription for how to get the labor movement back on track. So there were these ideas percolating around. Herbert Marcuse was an intellectual celebrity back in the 60s. He would speak at a college campus and the kids would go crazy, you know. What about this generation of young people? Are they visionary? Do they have outside the box ideas? And I think that's something we have to bring education to bear here and educate people for a better world, a more utopian world. I think this idea, you have to shoot for the stars. You have to say, you know, here's a quick story. 1965, a U.S. Senate subcommittee found that by the year 2000 we would have a 15-hour work week because of the advances in technology and production that we would, and if we only made what we needed instead of making a lot of junk and stuff that people don't need, when you're talking about a planet that has finite resources, we have to start looking at what we really need, you know. And if we did that and we spread the work around, instead of having one person working 50 hours a week, we would have two people working 25 hours or less, but getting an equal, if not greater salary. If those 15 guys with the 170 billion, if they gave up some of that with higher taxes, like Eisenhower, he had a 91% top tax rate, a liberal Republican back in the 1950s. I don't think we have any liberal Republicans. I didn't see any on the panel.
No, you don't.
My hope for Trump was, I was hoping if Trump would have stayed as a Democrat, and came out as a liberal, I'll bet you, and being a no-nonsense type of guy, and if he didn't have that horrific racial side that was just so repugnant, I think I'm hoping Bernie. I think Bernie is the man because I think he's the only one talking about this structural inequality, and that will produce tremendous effects in terms of a happier society, less crime, less violence. Because human beings are a product of our environments. That is the basic tenet of liberalism. Conservatives believe how you are born, that's how you will be, and I disagree with that. I think nature is part of it, but nurture is also a part of it as well. Nature and nurture.
Well, I'll tell you what, I agree with the side of the fence that you're speaking from. I think the problem, and this is what really disturbs me greatly about this country, that they're able to use not just class, but sex, race, and religion. Okay, as
to divide
a cover,
people,
and to cover up the fact that we do have structural inequality in our society. Now you're starting to see this now. You're going to see more of it as the campaign goes on. They're going to try and use it really hard against Bernie. I believe that Bernie will stand up to him and he will weather that storm. But it's just sad when I see working people in this country cheering a guy like Trump. And I gotta put this in. What in the name of God can anybody? You know, it really got me bent out of shape with that debate. When I see Jeb Bush standing amongst a group of veterans, and I'm trying to understand what has any Bush done in the last generation for veterans, except send us to wars that have no meaning, okay, and the only value are to the top 1%. this idea that we can just march into Iraq, take their oil, and life goes on happily ever after.
Yeah.
The worst kind of madness. And when I hear people talk about, we got to get Obama out of there so we can get our country back. Now, mind you, I have some huge bones that I would like to pick with Obama.
Okay.
I think that in many cases, when Obama had a chance to educate, he didn't do it. I understand that the speech that he made during the campaign, when there was, remember that big brouhaha about the Reverend Wright.
Sure.
And he was forced to make a speech about race. I think that was an excellent speech. But he wasn't, he didn't keep up that momentum through the first term.
Right.
Now, I was a volunteer for him both times in 08 and 12. I even went to Cleveland, Philadelphia and Cleveland in the 12 election.
Good for you.
Okay? And I found that besides being a lot of fun, I had a chance to speak with people and basically try to show them the era of the Republican way, and all that's good. Unfortunately, he played a little too much politics. I think that we are now seeing more of the real Barack Obama. Right. He feels more freer as he begins that downward trajectory to, walking out of the door. But the question is Hillary the one to pick up that where he left off at? Now, I have some big problems with Hillary's overseas policies. I keep thinking about what we did in Libya. Right. And I keep asking, why? What was the purpose of helping to overthrow that government? Right. And where does it end? Right. See? Now, you're saying some really deep things in terms of the structural inequality. And my question is, how can we do that?
I wanted to just say, this is something that you haven't brought up yet, and if you have, it's okay if you don't know, but I don't know if you do realize this, but I did run for president myself in 2008 and in 2012. I did declare myself a candidate, and because my political consciousness has been evolving over the past decade or so, especially as an educator who teaches from a social justice perspective, and we often discuss politics in class with my students. And, as my own political consciousness has grown by hanging around people like Stanley Aronowitz and great intellectuals such as that on the left in New York, and being part of discussion groups and going to Judson Church and the Community Church of New York, and being part of that dynamic, that social intellectual ferment, I began to see myself as a potential candidate. So I declared my candidacy in 2008 and also in 2012. I didn't get any votes both years, but it was a wonderful experience, and it gave me a sense of agency. Now, agency is a word from educational philosophy, and what it means is the ability to be an actor in your own life, the ability to not be stuck, to be able to move through the world, to make choices and act upon them. And I just got so tired of these mainstream parties with their kind of phony, scripted, they only go so far, they don't address the real issues. And I said, I don't care if I don't get any votes at all, I don't care if I don't get any corporate money or any endorsements, I am going to declare my candidacy. And it was a wonderful experience. And I'll tell you a quick story about the 2012 campaign. I was on the New York City subway, on the Uptown A train, and something told me, if I'm going to run for president in New York, I have got to do something on the subway. I got to do what they call a whistle-stop tour. And do something here. And so as the train was pulling into Columbus Circle, and it was a crowded train, it was rumbling in, all of a sudden I said, "Hi, everybody, my name is John Bredin, I'm running for president of the United States."
And what happened?
And I threw out a couple of policies. I said, I want a shorter work week. I want environmental sanity. I want this. I want that. Higher taxes on the wealthy. I finished my little spiel. Nothing. Everybody just like,
oh, God.
And I felt terrible. I was so embarrassed. I was like, you could hear the crickets, you know. I said, because maybe I was nervous. It was my first time out in public, you know. And so anyway, I'm kind of feeling defeated, you know, and the train pulls into Columbus Circle. The subway doors open. I'm walking out. There's a black young man who looked like he was in his early 20s, and he kind of, you know, he had a T-shirt and jeans. He was like, his head was back like this. He looked a little defeated, you know, and he was there, but he was looking at me. He had a bead on me, this young kid. He was checking me out like this, right? And as I was walking past him, I had my flyers in my hand. He looked up at me and he made a gesture with his hand like that because he wanted a flyer from me. And I put the flyer in his hand and he took it. And that one little human gesture that he was curious, this young black man, part of a race and a community that's been the most oppressed in our society. These are the people that the police are picking on and have no jobs, and he's sitting there, and everybody else just reacted with apathy. But he saw something in what I said as positive, and he opened. And then when that happened, I was filled with joy. I walked out of that train and I said, yes, I did my job. I reached one person that day. So that's just one of many stories on the campaign trail. And so I haven't been asked yet to run in 2016. I like to say I'm conferring with advisors, top advisors. But if Claudia gives me the green light, who knows? I may decide to jump in, but we'll see.
that I don't think I'm going to have any guest that can top that one. I don't think I've got that many people who have decided to run for president of the United States.
Officially now, you could say you've had a candidate for president on your show, Robert.
Yeah,
okay?
You better believe I'm going to use it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're on your way.
Yeah.
And I did that also to prove to people that they can take action. You don't have to sit back and take it. You don't have to sit on the couch all night and channel surf and look at these people, blah, 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 blah. You become passive. People need to take action.
You're right.
They need to get out in the world. They need to be with other people. They need to go places like Judson Church, Community Church. They need to get into protesting, start political movements, run for president, run for dog catcher, whatever it is you want to do. Create their own television show, which is what you did, my friend. And that's why we're here. And I think that's what gives hope, is through the action. Because when we don't take action, I think we can get depressed, we can get sad. You know, we see in America now the suicide rate is very high. We have only 5% of the world's population in the United States. We consume 66% of the pharmaceutical medications like Prozac. And so we are a very unhappy country here, you know. And the happier countries like Denmark have a social contract of the kind that Bernie Sanders is advocating for.
They most certainly do.
Right?
And that's why, like I say again, that's why I fully support Bernie Sanders. And I write. I'm starting to write a lot. And
good.
I'm doing some stuff with that Yahoo comment line. And, I get these right-wing knuckleheads, as far as I'm concerned, many of them. And, they always call, he just wants to take my money and give it to people looking for handouts. And I raise the issues. Well, hey, is it okay for huge corporations to not pay taxes and to get tax breaks? Is it okay for them to even try to arrange us getting into war in different parts of the world because it boosts their bottom line? Are you satisfied with that? And I tell you something else, and to me it's kind of hypocritical, because they're going to talk about, I want my country back. So you ask them, what do you mean when you say you want your country back? What year do you have in mind? And they always, 9.5 times out of 10, they're going to give me something out of the 50s. I say, okay, what was the highest tax rate, especially when we're talking about the wealthy people? What was the highest tax rate? under Eisenhower.
91%.
There you go. Okay?
Let's get it back up there.
Right. You're going to talk about...
Let's go right up back to 91. I
big
see no
government?
reason why we can't do that.
Yeah, well, they talk about big government intervention in the economy. Oh, well, gee, how did you get your house?
Right.
You know, or how did your parents get their home?
Exactly.
Because it's either going to be an FHA loan.
Right.
Or it was from the GI Bill.
Who built the roads? Fire department, police department, schools.
A lot of Republicans had their hand in that. Because it was necessary, it was for the infrastructure. But what is it now that, you know, you run around constantly quoting, you know, oh, well, big government is always horrible. Well, how come it wasn't horrible for your parents, or in some cases your grandparents, but it's horrible now?
Right.
Now, this is a part of the conversation that might, or some folks out there might find a little uncomfortable.
Okay.
But I believe that a lot of it, unfortunately, has to do with race. And I think that that's very sad. Because I think it's sad when you have so many people that willingly would cut their own throat, their own economic throat, because they think that I am getting a handout from the government.
Terrible.
Now, people always ask me, well, you always talk about when you're in the Middle East, and then on top of that, you always talk about Europe. You love Europe so much.
Sure.
Are those people so perfect? And I tell folks, look, there is no paradise this side of the grave, okay? You're going to have rich people, you're going to have low-income people, you're going to have fat people, ugly people, people that are not that bright, people that are super brilliant, basically the same. What I do like about the Europeans is that what you and I are talking about right now, a lot of these basic programs, the safety net, okay? They have no, it's like second nature to them.
Right.
You know, it would be a case of, why are we discussing this? This is just like breathing air.
Right. You know what's fascinating to me now? It's interesting how the United States broke away from Europe.
Right.
And at that time, the U.S., it was a big improvement because we had a sort of a breaking away from royalty and a democratic, you know, notwithstanding all the faults. You still had slavery, women couldn't vote, but it was a democratic impulse to break away from Europe. So that was a positive thing for humanity going forward. Then over the past 200 years of, you know, the first 200 years of American history, you had, you had strides made. You know, finally the slaves were freed. It took a bloody civil war to do it, but it was, you know, and then you had civil rights movement, women's rights. But now it seems like we're backsliding. And it seems like with this corporatocracy, everybody's sort of under the thumb of a kind of a tyranny, especially post-Citizens United. Citizens United, you know, opened up the floodgates for this control by the billionaire class, as Bernie calls them, you know, of our political system. And now we can look to Europe in a way that's nostalgic, that they are sort of ahead of us and their social contract. So it's a very complicated relationship between the United States and Europe, and maybe we could learn now, because they have socialist governments in Europe, and things are happening in Greece, and I don't understand all of it, because I'm not really a politician or a political person 100%. I mean, I'm into culture. I'm a writer as well. I have all these aspects of my personality. I'm an educator. My recent book I wrote is called The Magic of Everyday Life, about how people can feel happier in their lives and to focus on the positive things around them, and through experiences with art and through dialogue and community, we can be happier in our lives. I don't like to reduce everything to a political argument, but politics certainly is a big part of my personality. It's not everything. Psychology is something which is very interesting to me and important to me. And I think what we're doing now, Robert, is very therapeutic. We're having a therapeutic discussion, and it's the kind that you rarely see on mainstream media. Again, there's no cue cards here, there's no talking points. We're just allowing the hour to unfold organically, holistically, two human beings, thinking while we're talking. Again, I'm teaching a class called Thinking, Teaching, and Writing at NJIT this semester, and I think all these three categories are intertwined. So I do encourage you to write. You said you're beginning to write.
I'm starting to do that again.
And I just want to throw in just my most recent essay that I published is in the Huffington Post. I began to write for HuffPost. And the title of the piece is, Can Democracy Survive Our Dumbing Down Media and Education System? Can democracy survive our dumbing down media and education system? So what you're doing in this show is a wonderful thing. You're creating an antidote to that dumbing down by creating a space for humanization, for ideas, for intellect to thrive, and for the human voice to be rediscovered through your project here.
Well, thank you for saying that. I just, I consider myself a not very bright guy that just happens to see some things that are wrong, and that people, we need to get together and try and solve these problems that we have. That's how I came up with the idea.
You're a very bright guy, Robert. Your intelligence is different. I think some of the intelligence in this world, so-called quote-unquote intelligence, smart people are destroying the world. So, Howard Gardner talked about multiple intelligences. He's the great educational psychologist at Harvard. I'm looking at the clock, and we're down to about a minute or so. So I'll let you know that, and I want to say how grateful I am that you invited me on this show, Robert, and would love to come back at any time.
You will.
You are a good friend and a wonderful person.
You will.
And I'll let you say any words you want to close with.
Well, I tell you what, as long, this being my first show of the series, as long as I have guests like you, I'll be okay. Okay, because, not only have you helped me through the stage right of starting a new series, but you've also given me, and I'm sure my audience, some great food for thought. And that's necessary in this country nowadays. Yes. So listen, from John.
We have 30 seconds left, so you could still say a few things.
Okay. Well, from John, I was going to say from John.
Yes.
And from Robert. The Concern Forum wishes you well, and please.
Great title for a show, The Concerned Forum.
Yes,
I love that title. That's wonderful.
Right, and think about us every Saturday at 3 a.m. My bad. Every Saturday, 3 p.m.
It's been an honor to be your guest, Robert.
It's been grand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you for. And if we don't get in to see Chomsky today, so what? This was.
Oh, wait a minute! You go see Chomsky?
Yeah, we got our tickets in advance, but it's going to be a big mob scene there, and I might just watch it on YouTube.
Where's it going?
He's at the New School. He's speaking at the New School. Yeah.
My God.
But I chose you instead of Chomsky.
Well, hey, believe
that's
me,
something.
That's awesome. Man.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I thought it was good. How did you like it?
For my initial, knowing that it's not just me up here bloviating, but this is my series. And I think you helped me set up a very good yardstick. Because
appreciate that.
Now, this is the first one.
Thank you.
And we'll see what happens by the time I get to number 7.
Terrific. And when will this air on TV? This is going to go.
Next.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. You just let me know when, Robert.
Yeah,
okay.
Next Saturday.
Okay. Thanks again, my friend. I appreciate.